Hello again. For this next lesson, what we're going to do is we are going to use some of the filtering functions. So rather than looking at hundreds of thousands of cases, we're just going to look at a couple of specific ones. And we're going to build a little plot to see if we can detect some sort of trend over time. So as you'll hear me harp on this over and over and over, a big part of this class is the concept of reproducibility. And as we've gone through the other videos, you can see that I just keep building onto this syntax file. Now, there's a lot of really good benefits to doing this, but one of the main ones is you don't have to save a ton of versions of your file. I know how annoying that can be, where you're like, oh, I should save a version like this, but then before I do anything else, I should save a different version. This allows you to just keep the raw data file, this CSV, babynames.csv file, and then all of your code, and you can just always go back and rebuild the file as many times as you want. So rather than going through all those steps again, I'm going to just highlight all that and hit run selection, as we've done a number of times. The first chunk of this is going to read in all of the data, which, as you know, is hundreds of thousands of rows. And then the second chunk, which you actually didn't really get to see happen, but it did the altered data types and it renamed this. So all of the steps that we did in the previous video have now just been included. Something that you should know, by the way, is you can also write comments in here by using the asterisk. So if you just punch an asterisk in there, you can type absolutely whatever you want, but it's always pretty helpful to comment out your code a little bit and just say, you know, this code opens up the data file. I'll say the baby names data file. And then down here, I can say this code cleans and changes the variable types in data file. So you just kind of keep stacking onto here as you go. So one of the questions that I think we have about a data set like this that occurs over many years is whether or not there are any trends that exist within those years or between those years. So there are a theoretically limitless number of questions that we could ask about this data set, but in order to show you the filter feature, I'm going to ask a question about two particular names, and I basically want to know whether or not the proportion of a specific name has changed, has gone up, gone down, or stayed the same over time. And keep in mind, again, we're looking at babies born in the United States between 1986 and 2014. And so by gender, or by biological sex, I should say. So in order to do that, why don't we pick pick a name to start with. I'm sorry, I'm clicking a little too quickly. This feature right here is select cases. So as we've discussed earlier, these variables going across the top, these are called variables, and then going lengthwise like this, making the data tall, these are cases. So sometimes we're going to want to select a certain variable. We're interested in what year or what sex. Other times we want to just filter out specific cases, which is what this tool up here does. So what we're going to do is we're going to say select cases, and it pulls up this dialog box, and it allows us to pick cases in a lot of different ways. We can pick all of the cases, which we currently have. We can set up a bunch of conditions. So if the year is something and the name is something, something like that, we can have it randomly sample. And there are a couple of other options that we can do. But what we're going to do is we're first going to start with if it meets a certain condition. And what I am interested in, I'm going to pick a specific name and a specific sex. So we're going to say sex equals female. And then we're also going to use the AND function. And we are going to say name equals Taylor. Now there happens to be a pretty famous Taylor that was born in 1989, and I'm curious if this particular Taylor was on the upswing or on the downswing of female Taylors born around that time. So what we're going to do is we're going to say continue. And then before you move forward, it's going to give you a couple different options for how you want this output. You can either filter out the unselected cases, which means that all of the analyses that happen within this window will only include the cases that you selected up here with whatever conditions you used. You can also have it copy to a different data set. So it's a totally different window and everything else is still left here, but it kind of cuts everything out and moves it over into a data set that you name. The other option, which of course is the riskiest, is to delete all of the unselected cases. It's up to you what you want to choose. For now, I'm going to just say that I'm going to filter out the unselected cases. So that means that any function that we do while this filter is on will only include females named Taylor. And I could say okay and it would do it for me, but that's no fun. Of course, we're going to want to go with the reproducible option and click on the paste button. And if you move over to your syntax window, what you'll see, I'll put a little code here, filter out females named Taylor. And you can see that it put together the syntax for you. You put that, you select that, and then you hit run. And as you can see, it is basically marking out all of these cases. Now, if I were to click on name, you can always search. So if we go find and type in Taylor, you can tell I ran this experiment earlier. As we get down here in row 218, here is a female named Taylor. You can see that it adds this filter variable where this is a 1 and everybody else is a 0. So in 1986, there were 1,214 females named Taylor, and that represents 0.0006 percent of the entire proportion of females born in 1986. So is it on the upswing or on the downswing? There's a lot of different ways to calculate this, but one of the interesting ways to do this would be to just visualize it. Let's build ourselves a little chart. So under this menu for graphs, you can just go Chart Builder. And it gives you this dialog, which we can talk about later, but for now I'll just say OK. And it gives you all these different options for charts. And we'll do a little bit more looking into this later, but because it's going across time, I'm just going to use a line chart. So you drag it up there. Sorry, I wasn't very clear about how to do that. But I click this and drag that, and so now it basically allows you to just fill in what you want on the axes. So I am going to do the year, because this is a time series, on the x-axis, which is the one down here, the horizontal axis. And then on the vertical axis, I want to see the proportion of babies named for that year. So we've put that together. It's pretty simple. I'm just going to say paste. And as you might recall, here is your chart builder. So we're just going to run this code, hit the run code button, and this is the kind of distribution that we're looking at for women named Taylor. And as you can see, there was a pretty steady increase in the proportion of women named Taylor, leading right up to about the time of a particularly famous Taylor. And then a massive decline all the way through the 90s and the 2000s. But then, really interestingly, we see this little bump right there. And around 2007 or 2008. And then again, a decline. So I would ask all of you if you have some sort of theory or some sort of idea on what could be causing that.